I've seen some shady stuff from commercial landlords in terms of things like that, which is that's so shady.
You should always go to the lease. The lease is king.
They don't know what's in their lease.
The very first month they were on ramp, we saved them $480,000 over the next 5 years.
My goodness.
That's one horror story.
The reason why I find this conversation particularly interesting is, having been a multi-unit franchisee myself, having multiple locations, multiple leases in multiple states, all with different terms. This every time we would have to check something in the lease, I'd have to go digging through the lease every time to see what were the terms, what was it, how does it work, what's our renewal rate, when do we have to renew. One lease has we have to let them know 180 days out, one we have to let them know 270 days out, whatever it is. And so it was like a pain in the butt, actually, and I didn't even know that solutions like this existed. And my franchisor didn't tell me that something like this existed. So, like, what are you guys seeing out there in the marketplace, and what are the conversations you're having with franchisors and franchisees? Actually, before we get into that,
Yeah.
what are some horror stories you've heard about for people that weren't tracking or using your tool?
Okay. Well, I want to backtrack a little bit too because you brought up a good point. You always go to the lease. You're always having to look through the lease and dig through the lease. So the biggest problem that we solved is that right there. You should always go to the lease. The lease is king. And so our software, when you see the information within Ramp, you click on it and it actually scrolls down to page number 7 in your lease and highlights it for you. So you're always going back to the lease because that's the process that should happen. And if you don't, you run into issues. For instance, we had one group that we were talking to, and they wanted a drive-through because they needed a drive-through. So they're in negotiations. Their options coming up. The head of real estate's all excited. He negotiated it. He sends it out to the landlord. Crickets. For 2 weeks, he didn't hear back for the renewal. After the option period expired, the landlord emailed him back. Oh, actually, you missed the option period. So here's your new terms if you want the drive-through or want to stay on the location. That's one horror story.
Which is that's so shady.
So shady.
But unfortunately, landlord, and I don't want to give a bad name to like commercial landlords, because there's a lot of obviously great ones out there, but
Yeah.
they, in my experience, like they're there to make money, and the
Yeah.
terms are the terms, and they're there to do whatever they got to do to make sure that that their business is their needs are met. And I've seen some shady stuff from
Yeah.
commercial landlords in terms of things like that.
Right. Sometimes they don't have a choice. So if you have a really good lease, if you negotiate a really good lease with your landlord, sometimes it ends up being way below market value. And if you're the landlord there or the property manager, you have to answer to the owners. And when that option period comes up and you have a tenant that has a really favorable option, you're not going to send out a reminder and say, hey, you need to exercise this or you lose it. One of our clients, we have the largest Bojangles franchisee in the country on the platform. They came on in November of 2020. December comes around, but we didn't have to call him. He called us and said, hey, I just got a notification that I'm supposed to renew this lease on Wednesday. Is this real? And so he went into the software, saw it, and sure enough, that option was coming due on the 12th of December. And it was for a 2-acre lot up in North Carolina, and it was about $10,000 below market value. It was from a lease for 1995. So the very first month they were on ramp, we saved them $480,000 over the next 5 years.
My goodness. So if he would have missed that deadline, of
Yeah.
sending the notice to renew,
Yep.
then he would have had to negotiate a brand new market value as opposed to predetermined
Yeah.
values or step ups that were negotiated in the lease from 1995.
Yep. Because it was a 15-year lease, and then he had 3 5-year option periods on it.
Wow.
So.
So one of the things that happened to me, and and this was just like not fully understanding the lease, was we bought our second location. We bought it as a resale, and there was a term in that lease that said that the option to renew was
Hmm.
voided upon lease assignment.
Ah, that's a nice one too.
And I didn't know that. So we were in that lease for years. Let's see, we bought that in mid 2018. Let's see, I think we were going to renew a couple of years later. And it wasn't until then that the landlord said, "Hey, by the way, we have to negotiate a whole new at market value." Which I thought was interesting. And I think having had a tool that was able to kind of outline some of the terms in an easier way, probably would have been helpful. At least, I don't know, maybe we would have caught it before and, tried to negotiate. I don't know, but most people they don't know how to, they don't know what's in their lease.
Yeah. They don't know how to abstract the lease. And that's what we do at Ramp. We abstract the lease for you. It's a turnkey solution. So when you have that option period, it says what the last day to exercise is, what is the criteria to exercise. What often happens is landlords don't have to send out rent increases too. You're just supposed to pay the correct rent. But when you go to exercise that option, there's usually language in there that says you can exercise this option if you're current on rent. So we've seen they go to exercise the option and they owe $202,000 in back rent because they were supposed to be paying percentage rent, or they were supposed to have rent escalations for the past 3 years that the landlord never told them about. So they do what they're supposed to do to exercise it, but do they have 200 and something $1,000 on hand to exercise it in 1 week or a month? So we prevent problems like that too.
If you enjoyed this short clip from the podcast, you can check out another short clip right here. Or if you want to watch the full episode of this podcast, you can watch that here. And remember, knowledge is not power. It's applied knowledge that's power. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.